her credentials as far as a pioneer in reporting to the Washington Post. The 3 classic books, you know, the book on, I mean, it's almost required reading for any baseball fan. The book on Mickey, the book on Sammy, the book on the Babe. It's pretty much required. So we're going to get into a couple of different topics as if you are our commissioner now. So, you know, we're going to put you in there with, what, I don't know, who's your favorite commissioner as far as the
Nobody has a favorite commissioner.
So,
there isn't one.
Right. See, that's why James.
Yes, thank you. But he only made it 50 days before he had a heart attack and died, thanks to Pete Rose. So, he was a smoker also. That's true. I don't know. Maybe you do whether partly he was running his family or not. But he was a glorious man, and it's amazing that he was commissioner at all. Faye Vincent was a very good guy. The owners immediately regretted naming him commissioner because he actually had the wherewithal, or as they say in the locker room, the balls to stand up to shitty owners. I've got that in my system now. Go ahead.
So, as for day one, because remember, we're going forward in time, so Jane is our new commissioner. So, what is on your agenda for day one once you become commissioner?
So, despite the fact that Major League Baseball is bragging widely, loudly, frequently at how much the game has improved since the new rules went into effect in 2024, and it has. I mean, they've really worked, they've really helped in significant ways. Those rules changes, the most significant one is the pitch clock, which, timelessness is for science. It was okay to put in a pitch clock, it was necessary. The baseball players and batters did not have to stroll around up the baselines, scratching themselves and centering themselves, which is what was happening. The pickoff stuff that you can only throw, pitcher can only throw over to first has not really played out the way they expected it to. Getting rid of the shifts. Now, for those of you who don't know what shifts were, analytically inclined teams started here in Tampa Bay with Joe Madden. Had learned to move infielders. There was no rule given at the time over to right field. So if you were a left-handed hitter, getting a ball through the infield became impossible. So therefore, everybody tried to hit it over the infielders, and then they started putting people in right center field, kind of like your softball game on the wall in Washington. So that was a big improvement, but baseball libertarians hate it because they think it constrains their imagination. That's all right if their imagination is constrained. So they really have worked, and the pace of the game and the length of the game is very, very much improved. It was down to 2:38 last year, where it had been over 3 hours. And they also started having games begin earlier so that kids could go and people could get home, and all of those changes have worked. But the fact of the matter is, no matter how much they brag about, the increased attendance, the attendance last year, let's see, I wrote this to you, Josh, last night, but I didn't memorize it, was up 0.1% last year. So yeah, put out a press release and say attendance is up 3 straight years. It's been up 0.2% since the rules went into effect. That's not bad, but, give me a break. The fact of the matter is, with the exceptions of probably you guys, you two, everybody here is old. We're old.
Hey, what about me? I think
I couldn't see you.
Tony's doing it.
I'll have another book.
And as one of my, go-to guys, Michael Halpert, professor of economics at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, who knows more about the money in baseball than anybody on the planet, he looked at me and said, "We're old. You're dying." And so is the fan base that has supported baseball since through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And they have done nothing, zilch, to try to rebuild it by making fans of baseball games feel wanted. So day one, ready? Every kid accompanied by a sober adult, every kid under the age of 10, accompanied by a sober adult, will get in free. If you've watched a game, you know that there are swaths of empty seats at every weekday game and at a lot of the weekend games. That's why they have upped the prices for what they call premier games against, the Yankees, the Dodgers, whatever. So why not fill them up? Michael Halbert, my genius friend, pointed out to me that the main problem with baseball is there's too much inventory. Too many games, too many seats. That's why they're making smaller ballparks these days. They certainly haven't considered retrenching the amount of the length of the season, but they're going to have to if they add another level of teams to the playoffs. So you've got, it's not a good look. It's not that every day games sold out when Babe Ruth was playing. They weren't. They didn't. But you didn't face the television screen and see the emptiness, which of course sends a really bad message, which is nobody likes baseball. So, according to Michael's statistics from the 2024 Chicago Cubs menu, if you bought a kid size, hot dog, soda, ice cream, and a kid size pack, it would have cost the Chicago Cubs in 2024, ready? $4 million. Now, $4 million is not a small amount of money to me, and probably to you. But to Tom Ricketts and any baseball owner, these 30 guys, I don't care how much they plead poor amount. $4 million is bupkis. And if you don't know what bupkis is, that means it's nothing. And that same year, the Chicago Cubs paid Jason Taylor $21 million to play for the Dodgers. So I don't want to hear that they can't afford it. They need to take radical steps to rebuild the audience and make fans feel wanted. It costs so much to go to a game. I mean, in the old days, sometimes the old days were better, in the old days, you could bring your own food to the ballpark. Fat chance. They'd scan it and say, get rid of that peanut butter and jelly, right? So why not have a place, they have picnic places, why not have a place where you're allowed to bring your own food? Maybe make it affordable for somebody who doesn't want to pay $19.99 for an Aaron Judge 99 burger, which costs $19.99. And that doesn't even touch the crazy items that are offered all around the world. Many of them have like syrup and waffles with hot dogs.
It's interesting.
And pico de gallo, it's like insane. So make a place where people can go and, buy a fairly reasonably priced ticket and eat a sandwich from home. Why not? If they want to keep the home brew out of the ballpark, that's what people used to bring all the time. Mike Rizzo, former GM of the Nationals, would bring the home brew that grandma made in the bathtub to Chicago Cubs games back in the day. They want to ban that, okay, but let the kids in. And what's more, they used to do clinics before games. They used to actually have, like Mickey Mantle down on the field, teaching kids how to slide, or how to throw a ball, or how to swing a bat. And it's the proximity to the players and to the game itself that makes all the difference. The best story that I have, you guys know who Joey Votto was? Joey Votto was a career Cincinnati Red who had to retire because of injuries. And one of the times that he was injured, there was a celebration that day because he was their choice for the Roberto Clemente Award, and that's given annually to the most generous and philanthropic major leaguer. So he's standing out there on the mound in a Clemente jersey, and he's such a throwback guy that, in Cincinnati, you don't wear a Pittsburgh jersey. You get a fake one for an honor. So he wanted that thing off of him fast. He didn't want to own that thing. So he goes off the mound and he goes to his locker and he says to himself, you know, I could make somebody really happy. And so what he did is he took the Clemente jersey and one of his own, and he went to places in the ballpark he had never been, like the upper concourse, to the worst seats in the place. And there aren't that many bad seats in what's it called? Great American Ballpark, because it's such a bandbox, it's so small. So he just started wandering around. He didn't tell anybody he was going to do it. And people were like, huh. Since he was wearing a Barry Bonds jersey, and at first they were playing the Red Sox. It was an afternoon game, and some people thought he was a Red Sox wandering around. Until somebody said, "Oh my God, that's Joey Votto," and he sat in the stands and talked to people, and signed for people, and hugged babies, and answered questions at every level in the ballpark. And what's really important to know, was that he was shocked at how easy it was. He was charmed, he said. Whereas before he left the locker room with these two things, he had the shakes, the apprehension. What were these people going to want from him? What were they going to take from him? That is the state of the relationship between ball players and fans now. It's all transactional, and the fans have every reason to feel that way. So in addition to kids getting in free, there's going to be a designated rover player in the stands, commissioner. You cannot pull a groin muscle shaking hands or something. It cannot happen. There's going to be a guy, Cal Ripken, God bless him, who we all know broke Lou Gehrig's record for consecutive games played. He stayed every night at home games in Baltimore for his entire career and signed autographs.
And even in Tampa, when his last year,
Did he do it here too?
He did it here too. He would come in an hour early. He would do an hour and then an hour afterwards. Yeah. So yeah, it's
right. I mean, it's like, but the estrangement and the commodification of the game, of every aspect of the game, is so awful and so predominant that they have to start doing things for free. Back in the day, ballparks always had a day they let kids in free, teenagers. Yeah, they had to be a teenager. So at Forbes Field, for example, in Pittsburgh, Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, Washington. Saturdays, the lower right field deck grandstand was their place. They had a separate entrance. Think of what that means. You matter here, right? You have a special entrance. You can come, you can go, and it was out into the neighborhood. But kids came from all over those Pirates games. And one of them became a Pirates usher. And he was Phil, who died at age 102, and there's a whole thing about him. A lot of the kids who went to those games as teenagers became ushers for the game, and he was still doing it when I met him 2017. Because if you want kids to like the game and embrace the game, you got to give them purchase on the game. And that's primarily what Major League Baseball has failed to do.
So keeping the baseball thing, and I was kind of surprised you with this question, because I was thinking about this since you and I talked about stuff. But with the stadium, I'll give you an example, like you were talking about the attendance. As far as like the Rays, most of the people here, I'm sure, have been to Rays games. They don't even open the third deck because the lower level and the second deck.
Well, right now you can't open the third deck.
Right. Well, even if you could,
right.
They didn't have it open. So, obviously, Janet Smith, she was, I know you guys are tight. I personally, really quick on your thoughts on Janet Smith. One, we're hoping that if we get a new stadium, that she would be the one that designs it.
I've already told her she has to do it.
She has to do it, right? The other thing is...
Well, let me stop and explain who she is. Okay?
Yes.
Janet Marie Smith is the woman, first of all, she belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, that was my next question.
She was the person who designed Camden Yards, which became the font of design for most of the new, what are called retro ballparks. Now, she's an architect and a landscape person, and it was not her intent to create a movement so that every new ballpark should look the same. As I'm sure many of you have seen the picture, maybe been in Baltimore, it's built around what's called the B&O Warehouse, which was built in the 1800s. It was across the street from where Babe Ruth lived as a kid, and his father kept a bar, one of many. And it was, at the time, it was in a railroad yard. It was a warehouse. It was the biggest brick building in the United States. And so they decided that they wanted to bring baseball back to the inner city. That was the first major decision. And by anchoring it against part of Baltimore's history and culture, it gave them both visually a great, a great look, but it also gave them an anchor in the city's history. And so she did that with Larry Lupino, who actually stole a book I had, came to dinner one night. Larry Lupino owned or was running the Baltimore Orioles for Edward Bennett Williams at the time, and he was a neighbor of mine down the street. And I had this book that actually had architectural drawings of all the old ballparks, with the blueprints. And I've never seen one again, mind you. I've never been able to find another copy of it. He said, "Can I borrow this?" And I said, "Sure." And I knew that they were designing Camden Yards at that point. And finally, like 6 years go by, and I'm like, "Larry, where's my book?" And I said, "But Larry, where's my book?" He goes, "Ah." So finally, when I met Janet Marie at the Hall of Fame, probably around 2012, I think, I said, "Janet, what did you do with my book?" And she's a Mississippi gal. She's, got this fabulous Mississippi Southern delivery. And she goes, "Oh, we cut that thing up." And I'm like, I've never been able, but they used it to build, they literally took designs from each of these old ballparks and put them to use. But she's then went on to reform, rebuild Fenway at a time when they were all set. They were all set to tear it down, which would have been horrible, right? I mean, there's only two really old ballparks left, which is Wrigley and Fenway, and Dodger Stadium, which was built in the 62, is the third oldest, which is incredible, right? So she did Fenway, and then she helped at the Atlanta turn the old Olympic Stadium into the old Braves ballpark, which is no longer there to be played baseball at. And now she's reformed Chavez Ravine and made it a ballpark that they didn't make it when it was built. And, point of actual fact of how things have changed, they didn't have elevators in ballparks back in the day, or even escalators necessarily. So Dodger Stadium goes up pretty high, right? And there are these two wings that go out, which they extended. Back in the day, people didn't mind climbing the steps. Today, no. I'm not going there. So they put escalators and elevators at the ends of each wing, making it easier for people to get in and out. They created a plaza. It never had what she calls a front yard. They created a new plaza in the middle of that, great circumference of car parking. And it's fabulous. I mean, the architecture critic said she improved on a ballpark that was unimprovable and made it what it should have always been. And what's she doing now? She's still with the Dodgers. She built the Orioles spring training stadium down here. She did the Dodgers one that was Florida or Arizona. She doesn't have a new major league gig, and I really think she needs to do Tampa Bay.
So I know I kind of threw you off with that one, but I know that you guys are tight anyway. And I was going to say, that was my next question, is that I read up on Janet Marie Smith, because she is a legend in the baseball world. If you don't know her, and I was going to ask you, as commissioner, kind of, we need to get her in the Hall of Fame. The other
We
thing,
need to put her when she's on the Dodgers, dime. But I think that I would make her a commissioner, a sub-commissioner, assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner, whatever she wants,
Right.
in charge of how baseball looks. Because how baseball looks has a lot to do with how it's perceived and how it's played. I mean, think for example, think about this. They put netting in from home plate all the way down the foul lines, right? For, it's legalistic. It's the way the modern era is. Nobody should get hit by a flying bat that will crack in half because it's made of wood that breaks much easier than old wood used to. But you can't just take your glove to the ballpark and catch a ball anymore. You can't, except in the outfield. So she regards that as an opportunity to build around and to accentuate so that you can sell it as, you want to catch a ball, you want to bring your glove, get an outfield team. And it's worked wonders in Pittsburgh. Oh, I forgot to say she worked in Pittsburgh too, where she built the outfield experience, as it is now known, in all these ballparks. She built one in Pittsburgh. There's the one in Baltimore, which is defined by that building. It's a little carnival back there behind the right field stands where you can catch a ball, you can see where all the long swing runs are blended. You can read history. She's very, very adamant about putting baseball history about each city, each team, in each ballpark.
So, no, thank you for indulging me with that.
No problem.
One of the other topics that's come up is,
Yeah. Now, just generally, because I'm thinking, she's even come in and finessed some of those parks too. The Dodger Stadium recently in February, which is the holy moly in some ways of trying to keep both the history and heritage in that place, but still make some changes. I mean, she's had something to do with those as well.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. So Fenway, everybody's seen the seats now that are on top of the Green Monster. Everybody knows the Green Monster is. I bet you don't know what the Green Monster is. So in Fenway Park, they have a really high left field wall, and it was always called the Green Monster, and balls are hit off of it, which it makes it both a hard place to play left field, because you have to know the bounces, but also a really good place to play if you're a right-handed hitter, which is why they should have kept Alex Bregman. But that's another story. So it was her idea to build seating on the top of the Green Monster. And now, they're harder seats to get than the ones behind home plate. And I said to her, if I were you, I'd scatter my ashes up there. And she said, no, but I'll scatter yours.
By the way, USA won 2-1.
Yeah! Okay, sorry.
Only Joey Votto will be missed. I said only Joey Votto will be missed.
so one thing that, the trend of pitching and what's going on with pitchers and Tommy John surgery, it's become almost, and I've heard horror stories of even kids where they don't need it, but their parents are trying to push them to have it done so they will be stronger. And just the rate of Tommy John surgery, and the fact that we will probably, the way the game has changed, we'll never see another 300 win. I mean, look at Sandy in his career. I mean, we'll never see another Sandy Koufax. So what are your thoughts on, just the pitching and the Tommy John and
baseball used to be a game of duels. Kind of like the old westerns, you go how many paces apart, in this case it was 60 feet 6 inches between a pitcher and a hitter, and you'd see who would get who, right? And those confrontations were always a selling point. Sandy Koufax could not get Hank Aaron out for love or money. So one guy could not get out. So people would come to games to see, is this the day he's going to get, Hank out? Greg Mathews of the Braves couldn't get Tony Gwynn out, right? So you'd go and you'd look at that. And then there were also duels between pitchers. So, Koufax and Marichal and Warren Spahn, the 16-inning game in 1962 at the Stick in Candlestick Park in San Francisco, where nobody scored a run until Willie Mays hit a home run in the bottom of the 16th off 42-year-old Warren Spahn. You don't have that anymore. Those games are gone. One of the things that really pissed me off a lot, and I talked to Dave Roberts, the manager of the Dodgers, about this. Clayton Kershaw, who we all know, is now playing with the American team in the World Baseball Classic, thank you. But he's quit as a major league pitcher after this last go-around. He was throwing a perfect game on April 22nd. I think it's April 22nd. Somebody check me if I'm wrong. April 2022. He'd been injured at the end of 2021 and hadn't been able to play in the playoffs. And we all remember, some of us in baseball, because it's going to happen again, there had been, the owners had locked the players out. The collective bargaining agreement had expired. We didn't know whether there was going to be a strike. Spring training started late, so nobody had had the amount of buildup in their arm that ordinarily they would have had. But he went out his first start of that year and threw 7 innings of perfect baseball. No hits, no runs, no errors, no walks, nothing. And in baseball today, many of the decisions about how a game is played are made before the game. And so the decision had been made beforehand that he could only go 6 innings, and Clayton begged a 7th inning off of him. And then, he comes off the mound after the 7th inning, and he gets a pat on the rear and a pat on the shoulder, and Clayton's a pretty big guy, and he didn't want to make a big mahaf in the dugout, so he just accepted it. He gets a call from his former catcher, A.J. Ellis, in the locker room, and said, "What did you do?" And, as soon as he had agreed to leave the game, he knew he had made the wrong decision. He had accomplished everything in baseball that a great pitcher can accomplish, other than a perfect game. He'd come pretty close, lost one on an error, I think. But what A.J. said to me later is what we need in baseball and what doesn't exist in baseball is situational dexterity.
Was it his decision?
No.
Well,
Decisions are made.
said he agreed to.
Well, he didn't protest. He could have made a big fuss in the dugout. It would have been television. It would have been, there's no opportunity for a manager or the general manager whose analytics team, the operation, what they call baseball ops guys, to rethink it and say, well, wait a minute, this is extraordinary. Maybe we really need to let it go a little bit longer. Because last year there was, for the first time in a really long time, not one no-hitter, not one perfect game. Because pitchers are not allowed and are not trained to finish what they start. Sandy said to me when I talked to him about this, well, we didn't know any better. And to a certain extent, that's true. But this is not just a question of shouldn't be just a question of the Dodgers' self-interest, because of course they wanted Clayton Kershaw to be healthy for the rest of the season. But how about the fans? What about the fans? Don't you, I said to Dave Roberts, the manager, imagine if the headline the next day was Clayton Kershaw, the best pitcher of his generation, lefty, who studied at the knee of Sandy Koufax, came out after not being able to pitch since September and threw a perfect game in cold, raw weather in his first start of 2022. Would that be a reason to go to the ballpark? And the answer is, of course, yes. Because maybe you want to see something like that, or want to see that there's something like that might happen. Baseball isn't allowing that anymore. They take guys out so fast. Their analytics show that the third time through the lineup, pitcher's efficacy goes down. No kidding.
Well, isn't that because they throw as hard as you can
Thank you.
and wreck your shoulder? So
Yes.
they have to, it's sort of like physical, they have to.
Analytics and places like Driveline, which is the subject of one of the first chapters in here, which are data-driven training centers, which exist now everywhere. Driveline was the first. Have taught pitchers how to increase their miles per hour. They're the newspapers, such as they are, I'm not too many, and my beloved Washington Post sports section is now dead, thank you, Jeff Bezos. But people who write about these things, wherever they can write about it, they'll tell you, well, last year the guy, he had 90, meaning he could throw 90 miles an hour, and now suddenly he's throwing 97. Yeah, you can jerk up a guy's miles per hour. You can teach him how to do that. You don't necessarily tell him what the consequences are going to be. And so the miles per hour have gone way up, and pitchers are expected to throw what they call max speed, as hard as you can on every pitch, which is inevitably going to cause injuries to the elbow, to the UCL, the ulnar collateral ligament. And that's the ligament that was replaced first in 1975 on Tommy John by Frank Joe, who was the doctor, the first one to succeed Bob Curlin, who had been Sandy's doctor. And to give you an idea how crazy this is, whoops, my thing, I like that. Okay. Last year, and again, this is just to give you a now and then. In 1965, when Sandy Koufax was unhittable, was 27 complete games, which is insane, right? Last year, the most complete games thrown by any pitcher in the major leagues was 2. So pitching has been completely reinvented. And nobody in Major League Baseball is saying, what is that costing? And what it costs is heroes, right? I don't recognize half the pitchers today. And it costs a reason to want to go out into the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to see a succession of, hunks who throw 100 miles an hour for, one batter and then leave? Well, they can't. They have to go 3 batters. Now, that's another rule change. But really, it isn't just what's best for the athlete or best for the team. It's got to be thought of what's best for the game. And that is the last thing that Rob Manfred et al. Think about. So when I'm commissioner, it's going to be different. And part of the problem is that the training is so different. Pitchers rely on what's called, a kinetic chain. They use their legs to generate the power to throw the ball with leverage. It's kind of like when you throw a spear at something, right? Now, when you were throwing spears or cavemen were throwing rocks, they weren't throwing from a perch this high, which of course puts more stress on the shoulder and the elbow. So what pitchers in the old days did is they started training their legs, getting their legs strong. They don't do that anymore. They don't run wind sprints in the outfield on a warning track with coaches throwing balls ahead of them to make them chase them. They don't do it at all. What they do is they stay in the locker room and hit if you're a hitter against the newest thing is the traject machine, where they can literally program the machine to throw exactly like the pitcher they're going to face in that game. But okay, for how many innings, right? So they're all primed to bat against, I don't know, Garrett Cole, but he's gone after 3 or 5 innings. The average length the starting pitcher's pitch last year was 5.2 innings. And you're losing the narrative threads. The stories that baseball used to tell can't be told anymore because the game has precluded it. And that's, to me, I mean, I don't like throwing around words like tragedy. Tragedy is, tragedy is really gossip. This is not a tragedy, but it's lost its way. You can't, there's no comparisons you can make anymore. There, that history, it was always baseball's advantage over football and basketball and everything else because you could compare yours. You can't do it anymore.
Right. So I could ask 1,000 questions, but what do you think about opening up for a couple questions?
Sure. We'll
Anybody?
say anything. Yeah. Hi.
I have a question. So you talk about Sandy. In his heyday, how fast did he throw a baseball?
Well, of course, they didn't have the jugs going, which first measured them. I mean, Bob Feller, I think, raced against a car once, and it came up 100 miles an hour. I'm sure Sandy did throw that hard,
Yeah.
but not that often. Actually, his best pitch was his curveball. So Koufax is not going to tell you my funny Sandy Koufax story. There are many of them, but he came to my daughter's bat mitzvah because I stupidly said she could invite anyone. And I see so I call him and I say, you don't have to come. I know how you are at synagogues with Jews of a certain age, and I don't want you molested in my synagogue. So, don't come. It's hard to send her a ball. He goes, oh no. And this is proof positive that he is as good a human being as he was a pitcher, right? He says, oh no, I'll be there for Emma because, after all, I'm the guy who's taken her mother away from her for the last 2 years. He was first to arrive, having driven 5 hours from Pennsylvania, and I see the horde, they just open the doors, and I'm like, oh shit, and I grab his very, very well-tailored elbow and drag him into the rabbi's study. And people think he's a misanthrope, that he's, hiding from people. He's not, he never has. He just isn't somebody who needs the public gratification of clickbait. He knows who he is without seeing it, all the time in neon. So I grab him, but he is shy. And so I brought him a whole bunch of balls. And I put a ball in his hand. And Sandy Koufax becomes Sandy Koufax in quotes with a ball in his hand. Now his hands are gigantic. The first thing I did when I wrote about him is I asked people what made Koufax Koufax. And his buddy, Dave Wallace, who was the pitching coach for the Dodgers, Red Sox, Orioles, Mets, Braves, and now he's freelancing. He's working for the Kansas City Royals now. Said, somebody tell me, have you shaken his hand or shook his hand? Which is right? Shaken? Thank you. And I said, no, I have not. And he said, you shake his hand and you'll understand. Well, his hand, now my arms are hardly long, but his hand came up to here on me. And my hand could, like this, and again, not big hands, that fits in the palm of his hand. So Sandy Koufax, because of physiognomy, had complete control over a baseball. So he's sitting there in the rabbi's study with the ball, and I say, oh, Emma's got big hands. She can throw your curveball. My daughter gives me a look like she's going to kill me. Sandy says, Emma, show me your curveball. Well, she was a great tennis player, but not a baseball player. So she takes the ball between these two fingers and goes like that. And Sandy looks at her very patiently. He's great with kids, although he doesn't have any, not any that he knows of anyway. He said, well, Emma, the problem with doing like that's what Branch Rickey taught that wrecked so many Dodger arms. If you turn like that, you're putting enormous stress on, the soft tissue in your wrist and in your elbow. So you don't want to do that. What you want to do is that. Just put the ball between these two fingers. Now, if you have his fingers and they go up against the seams of the ball, and you just go that generates all the spin. So I have great footage of everybody in the rabbi's study going, shh. Even the cantor. And the kid who was being bar mitzvahed with her says, "That's not how you throw a curveball." And Sandy says, "Oh, Jonathan, show me your curveball." And Jonathan comes up and he goes, well, he's right-handed, so he goes like that. And Sandy said, "Well, Jonathan, the problem with that," he explains the whole thing all over again. And Jonathan says, "Oh, no, my coach told me you've got to." Sandy says, "Jonathan, just do it for me, okay?" And, you know, you can see his father going. And the kid goes, "Oh, no, that's not how you do it." And Sandy looks at him and said, "Jonathan, that is not how you throw a fucking curveball." Huh? It's a true story. Yeah. Well, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think that my point is that Sandy was a pitcher, not a thrower. And
Right.
to me, the general managers today, what they're missing is, would you rather have Sandy Lopez throwing 93 miles an hour than all these guys who come in and throw 100 miles an hour?
Well, nobody knows how to change speeds. You know, back in the, part of the thing about Koufax was they now call this tunneling, right? But you can just say it easier. The ball came, first of all, the ball came out of his hand different than it came out of anybody else's. And the motion that he used to throw his fastball was exactly the same as the one he used to throw his curveball. So when it got to the plate, batters literally didn't know whether the ball was going to go up or going to go down. They were absolutely flummoxed. And he really just used 2 pitches for most of his career. And he changed speeds the way people used to. And he was elegant. He was a thinking man's pitcher. And the only problem saying that is, of course, then, you know, people interpreted that as it being a statement about his Judaism, which it is not. But, you know, that he didn't want, unlike Drysdale, who was, you know, 1A, Drysdale threw at people. Drysdale was a tough mother. At Sandy, you know, wouldn't throw at anybody. And he got really angry about that late in his career because he didn't want anybody thinking that he wasn't tough. He threw inside, and he finally buried a fastball in Lou Brock's ribs when he stole extra bases on him and made it look bad. And he was really pissed. So, you know, very competitive human being. Yeah.
So how do you think Willie Mickey and the Duke and all the great hitters of the 50s and 60s are doing in today's modern era as far as pitching?
How would they do today?
Yeah.
There's a guy named Jason Ochart who runs the Red Sox hitting program, now minor league hitting program. He was the hitting director at Driveline. Driveline, I think I mentioned, was the first data-driven training center, baseball training center. And it teaches radically different ways of learning to hit and learning to throw. And Jason is this, you know, nice kid. He wanted to be a pitcher. He wasn't big enough. He didn't throw hard enough. But he devised a way of teaching pitching and hitting that is different than anybody has ever used. And now it's spreading like wildfire through the major leagues. And I asked him, you know, when I first met him, is when I was writing about Dave, and I said, everybody says, you know, he'd look like crap today. He wouldn't be able to hit modern pitching. And his answer was, give him a 32-ounce bat and he'd be fine. Well, I'd say the same thing about Willie Mickey and the Duke. If you're that good, you find a way to adjust. Yeah.
I'm interested, English teachers,
Oh, nice.
about your writing process. I just heard you say it took 2 hours to do your Sandy Koufax book.
No, it took
Or 2 years.
4 years to do Koufax.
Oh, okay.
4 years to Koufax, 5 Mantle, 8 Booth.
So from start to finish, when you get the idea, what is your writing process? How does that turn into idea to published book?
Do you read a lot of Joan Didion?
Who?
Joan Didion?
No.
You should.
Okay.
She's now long dead, but she was preeminent essay writer and novelist. artist. And
Okay.
she was known, she's in California, later she moved to New York, but her sentence structure
Okay,
and her use of detail
okay. I like to know.
informs everything I do. I happen to know that my dad was a literary and entertainment lawyer, and I met her when I was quite young, like that. And when I taught writing at Georgetown, did the same thing. God is in the details, and good writing is in the details. I didn't want to write this book. The reason I wrote this book is because I couldn't find another baseball player character on their level that hadn't been done really well. I mean, Richard Ben Kramer wrote about DiMaggio. Nobody's ever going to do that better, and I'm not going to be a fool to try. And I also won't write a book about a subject that a friend has done because I just don't want to go there. So, you know, Hank Aaron is not doable. They suggested Nolan Ryan, and I said, well, yeah, I mean, he pitched a lot of games and a lot of no-hitters, but did he ever pitch an important game? Where's the drama? No drama. The drama was when the Mets were stupid enough to trade him. Clearly baseball was changing, and I wanted to take Sandy and Joe Torre to a game and say, Joe agreed, and I said, Sandy's never going to do this, and Joe said, what do you call it? Sure. Take them to a game and ask them how to analyze it, pitch by pitch, how it was different today than it would have been played in '65. Would have been a great book. Sandy said, no fucking way, which is what he always says. And so it evolved into a book about how the game has changed and then what I would do different. But when I started it was in 2022. They had just hired Theo Epstein to come up with rules changes. But the publishing cycle, as I'm sure you know, it's not like writing on deadline for a newspaper the next day. It takes a year, probably more, to get it into print, by which point everything I would have written about that would have been old. So instead, I reconfigured it to be my tour of baseball in 2023, everywhere, every level, like college, little league, you name it, to see how the new rules were playing out, whether they were successful, and what else needed to be done. And the first thing I came up with is a title. And I kind of regret it, actually. It's a really good title. But everybody watched the World Series, or at least some of it? I know you didn't. This World Series, this postseason, was the best in years. And so I got a lot of people coming to meetings and saying, what are you talking about? It needs to be fixed. Not what's wrong with it. And I said, what's wrong with it is that the baseball you just saw is not played in the regular season. And so, it was so good, everything about it was so good, that if they could find it in themselves to have that game played, they might start to draw people back. You had Yamamoto coming in to pitch 2 days in a row, young Japanese hurler, who trains very differently than American pitchers, and you know, it hasn't, at least to date, been injured. And it was glorious. It was baseball at its very best. But you're not going to see that when the regular season starts. It was not a good augur of future events that yesterday's game at George Steinbrenner Field was marred by sewage flowing into the Yankee clubhouse and all over the grandstands. They had to close a whole part of the stadium. It was gross. And we're also looking at the end of this collective bargaining agreement, which will expire on December 2nd, and the extraordinary amounts of money that the Dodgers specifically, but not just the Dodgers, though, you know, come on, $60 million a year for Kyle Tucker? Are you kidding me? I mean, it's just like, it's insane. But the Dodgers have the money and they have the brains. They figured out a way to game the system that nobody else has figured out. You can't blame them for doing that. You just have to change the rules so either everybody can do that or they can't do it. The owners are desperate to impose a salary cap the way it exists in football and basketball. Because right now you have incredible inequities. You have, the Dodgers with, what's their payroll going to be this year, $500 million, something like that? And, and the Royals at $60 million. Just it.
What's going on in sports journalism right now, and are there any Jane Leavys in the pipeline?
There are a lot of great writers in the pipeline who have no place to write. So, for example, Chelsea James, who was the Washington Post national baseball writer, has now gone to SNY, which is the Mets cable, system, to be their insider, meaning that she'll be posting and twittering and Xing, little tidbits every day, and not really writing. The Post is running AP stories. It's unforgivable. I mean, sports actually sold their newspaper for them, not just in retrospect. It was selling it now. So it's about the stupidest thing Jeff Bezos could have done, among the many stupid things Jeff Bezos has done.
Tell us what you really think.
She's commissioner, she can say what
I
she
can
wants.
say what I want, exactly.
Mark, speaking, just real quick, we were talking about the inequities with the Yankees last year. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Rays spent $15 million, or the city, however you want to phrase it, for the use of Steinbrenner Field, which is more than they paid any individual player on the Rays team. That just shows, am I right about that, Mark?
Yeah, actually, I think it's more than they paid any player on the field.
So, Jane, that
I
just
think
shows.
they overpaid, given what happened yesterday.
If you had been commissioner at the time, would you allow for this automated ball strikes? Because that's going to have some impact to the game as well.
Yeah, the robo-up, so for those of you who don't know, they have a system that's going into effect regular season this year, but it'll be used in all spring training games, where they basically had a robot whispering in the ear of the home umpire. And if the home umpire gets it wrong, then each team gets 3 challenges a game. They can, I think it's so funny that this, progressively technologically advanced system is triggered by patting your head, right? So if they think they have the wrong, the umpire made a wrong call, 3 times a game they can go. If they're right about it, and the umpire made a bad call, then they keep that challenge. So they can have 3 throughout the game.
Because
What are they doing?
what I found interesting with that, one of the drawbacks I think has been instant replay. They allow the guy to go to the phone, call upstairs, talk about delays of game. That's one of the things they should stop. You either have to do an immediate call, or you don't get it.
So it's inevitable, right? I mean, the human brain has this unholy desire to put itself out of business. And, all what's coming with AI is going to be way worse than, the warnings are on the horizon. I don't think there was any way they could not use this technology, and I'm okay with the challenge system, as long as it stays the challenge system. I'm much more concerned of all the other ways they might automate it. And if it stays like this, okay, I mean, the most famous, I actually wrote a whole article about this, but, cherish this World Series. It's the last that's going to be completely humanly adjudicated. I mean, I always thought bad calls, bad bounces, bad luck was part of the game, and the issue was who adjusts to it best. And there are always going to be gusts of wind or sun in your eyes, like Willie Davis and '65 World Series, or '66 World Series, where he drops 3 balls in 1 inning, and it was Sandy Koufax's last game, and against the Orioles. Those things happen. You know, Washington won the World Series in 1924 because there was a pebble in the dirt at Griffith Stadium, and twice the ground ball hit it and hit that pebble and went over the third baseman's head.
Blown call in the 85 World Series.
I'm sorry?
The blown call in the 85 World Series.
Blown call in the 85 World Series. And how about the blown call at first base in Colorado's game? That guy had a perfect game going, Detroit pitcher, and the umpire at first base got the call wrong, and he lost his perfect game. Now, he knows he threw a perfect game because the out was made, but there was no recourse. What's sweet about that story and telling is that they became friends.
Right.
And they really came to an understanding between them. I mean, you know, you couldn't have felt worse than the other did. So I agree that maybe they should limit the number of replays the way they're limiting the number of challenges, because it certainly contributes to slowing down the game. Yeah.
So arguably the greatest player of all time, Willie Mays, has there really been a great biography on him, and is it someone that you would consider doing?
There have been great books about him. There have been a lot of books about him. He contributed to one, Done by a Friend. That's probably the most recent one. Very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. He wasn't a real talker in the. He was very untrusting of reporters. What else is new, right? And none of his, peers are alive to talk about it. I don't think I would do it. I think it would be really hard. My test for myself is, could I find something new? And I had the same doubt about the Babe Ruth book. But again, here's the other side of technology. Because of technology, all the birth and death records and judicial records going back to Babe Ruth's childhood have been digitized, and I was able to go to the Maryland archives and find out that Babe Ruth wasn't he wasn't truant, but he wasn't a bad kid. He wasn't locked up. He wasn't sent away by the police to live by himself in a reform school, which is where he went, St. Mary's Industrial School for boys. He was sent away because his father caught his mother stooping his bartender on the dining room floor, divorced her, and didn't really want to be bothered with a 6-year-old kid. And he sent him away and never visited him. And that, to me, was the key to understanding him. No other reporter previously, in all the really good books written about him, were able to find that, because they would have had to read every day's, Baltimore Sun and Baltimore News American, starting in 1900, just to find the statement where George, Herman Ruth Sr. says, makes an announcement to all merchants, do not allow Kate Ruth to shop in their store, because I've divorced her and, I'm not paying her bills anymore. So Babe Ruth hid this for his entire life. He never admitted it. Why would you? I mean, it wasn't the culture that started here with Sally, Jesse, and Raphael. There wasn't somebody's, televised shoulder to cry on her. Everybody said, oh, that's really sad, babe. It must have been really tough on you. It wasn't a confessional culture. And he hid it. But when people said to him, you were a really bad kid, he got really pissed. Go talk to the brothers at St. Mary's. They didn't think that was a bad kid, and they didn't. Did he go run amok when he got out of there, having been stayed in that school longer than anybody else ever had or would? Yeah, he did. So there's an elevator. He'd never been on an elevator. The first time he was in a hotel with an elevator, he went up and down it for 3 hours. He'd never ridden a bicycle. He went, racing down the street on a bicycle, almost got himself killed in his first spring training with the Orioles. So I felt that that gave me the key to understanding him, and that's where technology becomes an advantage.
So, yeah, I was gonna say, with all the success of Jesse Cole and Savannah Bananas, do you think MLB will, and I'm not taking from a baseball perspective, but fans selling out Raymond James Stadium and alike, do you think they're gonna kind of gravitate towards those type of things? Because the things you're talking about are similar, I mean, some of the things at least are similar to what they're doing.
Has anybody here been to the Savannah Bananas game? Go once and never again. Jesse Cole, who created this, is a genius. He's a marketing genius. And he studied it in college after his pitching career went south because he injured his arm. And he understood very clearly before Major League Baseball even started to think about it, that there was a real chasm between the fans and the game. So he has guys wandering through the stands. In West Palm, at one Bananas game, this guy, they have teams, the bananas are in yellow and the party animals are in pink. And one of his gigs, which I just found out about, is that, they're all really stumbling, these guys are built and probably taking steroids. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. They always put guys in the stands. So I'm sitting there during the game, which remember, I'm doing. And this party animal goes up to this little boy, gorgeous little kid, and says, "Will you sign my jersey?" Right. Think about what that means in terms of the relationship. Nothing in baseball or in sports today means more than getting an autograph. Imagine that you mattered enough to get one.
Yeah.
And the assistant manager of the Bananas, a fallen lawyer, said to me, that kid just became a baseball fan. And it's true. So Jesse recognized that you had to go to extreme lengths to do it. I don't think Major League Baseball is ever going to use the rules that a foul ball is an out, or the running around to get an out at first base like crazy, or having people do flips behind their back, to make a catch. Baseball is great enough as it is if you teach people to watch for that stuff and not just home runs. So I have a really great Bananas sweatshirt. I love my sweatshirt. But one time was enough. I didn't, and where it was really great was when it was intimate, when we were playing in the bandboxes. And you could really get to. I do suggest that another Jane Commission rule, that instead of having 2-minute and 15-second commercial breaks between every half inning, and that we cut it back down to 90 seconds, which is what it used to be, and have 2 long breaks, one after the 3rd inning, one after the 6th inning, and do all the big advertising stuff there, and use that time, 6 minutes or so, to do some of those stupid things that the Bananas do on the field. Have the babies race down the baseline in their diapers. That's cool. I could do without the fat dad bods shaking as they run around the bases. But again, you want to do everything you can to get kids specifically, on the field closely. Why can't they run against the flying presidents? Why can't a high school kid warm up a pitcher? There's so many ways, and Dave Roberts said probably the most salient one. When I was a kid, I would go down to Yankee Stadium to watch Mickey Mantle take batting practice. You can't do that anymore. One, he's dead, and two, they've flipped it. So the home team takes batting practice before the gates open.
Right.
So you can't go down and see your heroes take batting practice. And half of them don't come out on the field, and I think that has to be required. I'm sorry, come out on the field and put on a show. If you really want, $60 million a year, it's the least you can do.
So what we're gonna do is, because of time, we wanna make sure that everybody gets a chance to sign, because we talked about 45 minutes and we were gone over an hour. So thank you. And
That's 'cause I know
that's
about-
good, that's a good problem to have. But we just wanna make sure everybody has time and, you know, for them to speak to you briefly. So I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Mike, yeah, the pressure of doing a book, the biographies, the difference between the legends, and they're all legends, all three, but with Sandy in particular, what is the pressure of doing a biography on a living legend?
I never expected to meet him. I never expected to talk to him. I never expected him to come to the bat mitzvah. I wrote him a letter that I sent through people I knew he respected, the head of the Players Association, and his friend Fred Wilpon, who then owned the Mets, explaining the book I wanted to write. And I didn't care about his marriages that had ended. I didn't care about, you know, the gossip. And I said it straight out. I said, I want to write about your career and how it's a reflection of the time in, you know, in which, in the time in America when you pitched and what was changing, what was the process. And he called me up, and I never expected that. And he said, "Hi, Ms. Leavy," and I was shocked. He said, "Right." And he said, "This is Sandy." You know, he never has to say his last name. He said, "I don't really have any interest in your book. But," and you can see I can talk at length. And so I started talking, and he was very well raised by his mother in Brooklyn. And he's so polite, he didn't interrupt, even though I talked for an hour and a half straight. I told him about my adopted children. He's adopted. Everything that I wanted to do I still don't have any interest in your book, but if you want to come down to Vero Beach and talk to me, that's okay.
Great.
And then I went.
Yes.
He never sat down for an on-the-record interview. What he offered was priceless, better than that, frankly. He said, "You can call me to check any fact, and I will tell you," and he's such an honorable guy, I didn't doubt that he would tell me the truth. "And you can tell anybody you want to talk to, who's not going to agree to talk because of me, that I said it's okay, and they can call me if they want." And most people did. So it was the best of all worlds.
So Jane, thank you for being here, and I know we had some people come in while we've been doing the presentation, so the books are up sale, in the front for sale. Make sure you come up and get your autographs and get your book signed. So thank you again for being here, Jane.